Okay, let's start by looking at what we've got in our Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager. So we'll see what's actually showing up there in terms of VMs that we currently have. Okay, and as we can see, as expected, it's a big fat 0. So there's nothing resident on this particular machine. So what can we do? Well, the things we can do is let's go off and do a bit of internet exploring. Probably got Google Chrome or something else installed, just sort of fairly fresh, so haven't done anything as such here. So I'm going to look through an Ubuntu server that I can download. Let's go and see what we've got. There's that looks interesting at the top. There's Ubuntu Zeros. I don't think I've loaded this one before. I've loaded some others, I'm not sure. What have we got? We've got a 32-bit machine as a desktop. We've also got a server installed image permanently on the computer. No, it won't start the graphical interface. Do you want to see something graphical or not? And that's your choice, really, between those two. I don't know, let's go for something a bit more graphical. So let's start downloading that image. So let's save that and see how long that's going to take. So take a little while, so come back and resume when that's a little bit closer. Now, in fact, whilst we're waiting for that to download, because that's going to carry on, let's return to where we are. Now, in the past I've downloaded some files here. These are OVFA formats. So if we have a look at that, we can see that that's actually an OVA, and that is something I've exported from another machine. So I could import that into, hopefully, my current machine. So if I go to File, I previously exported that, I can now import that. So I go looking for that file. It's in my downloads directory. You can see there's two, in fact. There's a mininet and a Windows XP. So let's pull in the Windows XP. We can see the sort of size of that, 13 gigs. So let's open that up, and away we go. So next, and then import, we can see that we've got a number of options that we could click in here, but I suggest we don't touch anything. The only thing you might want to change here is the MAC address, because of course the MAC address it has will follow, but you can change that later anyway, so there's not of great importance. You might have some clashing if you're using DHCP locally and you've got a load of VMs running on different machines and they all compete in terms of announcing themselves to the world with the same MAC address. So you might need to change that. Notice I'm importing, so this is going to take a few minutes to actually bring that in. So we've got a few minutes on a download, so there's a couple of activities in parallel here. So now's the time to pause. Right, as we can see, the file is actually downloaded off the internet, which is now an ISO. If we actually have a look at the folder there, we can actually see that sitting alongside the mininet here. I'll put in the downloads folder. I've got rid of XP out of the way, give it some space, so you can put this in. So what we've got here is a disk image. And the grand thing, this is effectively going to be my DVD, my CD DVD, which I can slot in. I can slot that in virtually in a moment, and install from that, and effectively build a Linux machine. So we're just in the throes, so we'll move that to one side for just a second. We're just in the throes, of course, of building mininet, and there it is. So mininet is actually in, and that is a VM in its own right. So we can have a look down the sort of window here, or we could just pull up settings for that, which will give us a pop-out window to have a look at. So we can see the general settings for this. It's a 32-bit Linux. We can see whether or not we've got clipboards and the like. System is important because in here we can find the memory that's been allocated to it. We can see how many processors have been allocated. Only one. We could up that. Depends on how many processors you've got, of course. And you may have a number of other VMs which you want to share out. These resources have to be careful. Not interested in the floppy, so I move that down out of the way. Hard disk is probably the normal boot drive. Yep, because that's what we'll be using. and that's the sort of thing we would see. Not showing anything here on acceleration. I'll explain that another time. So the display, might want to put that memory up, depends on what we need to do. I think 64 megs for this particular one because it's only really a command line interface, so no need for acceleration here. Storage, remember of course, is indeed our disk, and this is a VMDK. That was the one that was actually contained within the OVA, and in fact that's what you'll see. VDIs you'll have to convert to VMDK in order to then export them. If you've got this, then you can see here I've got an empty disk at this moment in time. I could install a disk into this. Right, okay. Now, one thing I need to check is I need to check to make sure that that VM is sort of all singing and dancing for this particular version of Oracle. So I'm just going to have a look and see which version I'm playing with. And the version that I've got here, I can see at the bottom here, is this 5122. Okay, so that's the variant that I've got. If I look in downloads, which is where I stored stuff before, I can find this is the VirtualBox. This is the actual main platform. And then also running alongside that is the extensions packs, and both of those I've installed in order to create the VirtualBox manager. And indeed the extensions which will allow us to install what's called guest editions, which speed things up, which give greater access to more sort of graphics and all the like, so more access to more drivers really, which is what the guest edition. And you need to install the guest editions for any Linux or any Windows machines, any VMs in fact, that you want to run up on your VirtualBox manager. Now they will run without the guest editions, but they'll run with a limited set of capabilities, so the guest editions should be added, and you can add them either through the disk, through a sort of a graphical menu, or you can actually do it at command line, which we'll have a look at a little bit later. But first things first, let's see what else we need to do. Now, if you remember, also in fact in downloads, we've been downloading this file here, this disk image. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to get that also into VirtualBox Manager. So this is the other way, if you like, of bringing them in. So we need to bring in a new. It's going to be an Ubuntu server. Now you can give it something fancy. It might actually turn into your DNS, for instance. I'll just call it Ubuntu, just so we know what we're talking about. It's a Linux operating system. As you can see, you can pick out one of the varied, which is quite handy. So we've got Linux and which type it is, 32 or 64. Now that depends of course upon which variant we downloaded when we clicked on the download button. Now I actually went for in terms of what we were dealing with, the desktop, but I picked out the 64-bit variant, so interesting. Let's see. Now the mininet was 32-bit. This is actually a 64-bit, but in terms of the variants that I'm able to select from here, I can only pick out a 32-bit, and that's because I'm actually installing this sort of almost Russian doll sort of style inside another VM, so this whole thing is running in a VM. So I've only got 32-bit as the option to pick out. So Ubuntu 32 is what I'm going to go for. Let's see if it likes that. That's the available memory. Well, if you're going to run a server, then you're going to need that, at least that, aren't you? What's available to you. This is what we can start to dice up. Now, create a virtual hard disk now. Yes. Okay. And which type? Now, lessons learned. If you want to export it, then VMDK, and that's supportable across VMware and Oracle. If you want to support that across Oracle and resize it later, then I suggest you do a VDI. You can always convert it, clone it into a VMDK later for exportation purposes, and avoid the VHD stuff unless you're going near Windows and Windows Virtual PC. So VDI is the format I'm going for. Dynamically allocated in terms of the hard disk size. Now, what are we going to use? So Ubuntu is the name. the hard disk drive that I'm going to use is saying 10 gigs. I'm going to keep it. I could change that, and I'd be mindful I probably should have done, because I'll probably have to resize it later if I was really going to use this. Now that seems to have created something. Well, it's just really created the head. The sort of what we've got here is an indication of the parameters surrounding the VM itself. So what I need to do, in fact, is I need to run this up. Now, one of the things I can do here is I can have a look and see what I've got here. I've got a VDI, which in fact is pretty empty. There you can see the actual size, so there's nothing on it. And I can see that I've got nothing in my disk drive. So if I click on the right hand icon here, I can go away and choose one. So if I go into downloads, I can see that that image is available for me to choose. So that image is now going to appear in the empty disk drive. There it is. So that's now in place. So save the settings by hitting OK. Or some invalid settings detected here, so it might be worth going back to actually have a look at those and change those. So let's have a look and see what we've got. So back into settings. Let's see, click on the invalid indicator, and we can see here that more than 50% of the host computer is assigned to the virtual machine. Okay, so that might not be left enough for the host. That would certainly be true if there were other elements actually running at the same time. So we'd have to be sort of mindful of that. Okay, good. And that's another one of those key pointers about when you're putting VMs together. Make sure that you are sharing out the number of processors and the amount of memory in order to make sure that the other VMs will actually be up and working alongside yours. So I've got another VM running here that's running in parallel. That's on the host machine. So again, what this might be worth me doing is actually going in and shutting that machine down so that it's not taking up some of my very valuable resource, and that will help hopefully with those errors. So that's not on this machine. That's remember, we're sort of in Russian doll technology here in the way that we've aligned things. So hopefully useful nonetheless. So we can have a look again, remembering what it's saying in terms of the system memory that's been actually allocated. You could reduce that, but of course that would then change the performance of the overall machine. Okay, so let's live dangerously, as they say, and we haven't done anything yet, but now we're going to hit the start button. This is going to start this. Now, unlike mininet, will actually start up and start running because we've actually imported that in its entirety as a working machine. This is unbuilt. This is a machine in its plain vanilla wrapper. So what we'll see here is the fact that now here's another problem. So what we've actually got here is a problem whereby we've tried to load the wrong operating system on, and it's belly aching. So back to the drawing board and loading the appropriate operating system. So unfortunately it's a power off that machine, but not all is lost, as they say. So back to the drawing board, we go back to here, we find that in fact we've got a 32-bit variety, and all we need to do is download that instead. So this is sort of reinforcing two things. Get your resources right in terms of your memory and CPU, but also make sure that the operating system type that you're using is either 32-bit or 64-bit. Again, appropriate. The clue was right at the start when it was only allowing me to select 32-bit. But again, that's because I'm in this unique position where I'm actually building a whole sort of virtual environment actually inside a VM. So if you normally you'd have a 64-bit host, in which case you can allocate and use 64-bit machines within. Here we'll find that we can only run 32-bit machines within. So we're just waiting for that to download, and we'll be back in a jiffy. Okay, so we're back, we're downloaded, we've got the correct version this time, we hope. So back into settings, back into storage, we've got this one in place, so we can remove that. We can simply then go a hunting and see if we can find our other file that we've downloaded. So we'll see where that's actually in play. Oh no, a minute and 33 to go. Just wait and we'll be there. Right, so it's ready for us, it's downloaded. So let's go back to VirtualBox and we can see. So we're going back, so we've got an empty drive. Let's go and choose one. Got a choice of two. Let's go for the 32-bit as opposed to the 64-bit machine. Fill in the blanks, good. Fire in the hole. So the sort of head settings that we had there for that is perfectly fine. And we can see that firing away in the background. So this is actually booting up. But of course what we've got here now is a machine, which is just a bare metal and CPUs, hard disk drives, but in a virtual world now, so it's all virtualized. With a CD or DVD dropped into the side. So it's booting off of that DVD, it's booting off that ISO. So it's still booting away. 1604, which is the correct version. And if we try and overstretch this, you'll see that the screen in the middle doesn't go with it. And that's because we haven't installed the guest additions as yet, which is something that we'll do a little bit later. So just waiting for that to go, and we'll come back and go through the normal install when we get the first of the prompts. So it's starting to hackle away in the background, so let's just wait. Right, just watching it. It's nice to see a blank screen every now and again. And here it comes. Right. Just wait for it to get sort of dandy for us and we can get in and start. So we're going to install Ubuntu. It's in English, so away we should go. Just tidy up a couple of screens here. Okay, download updates while installing Ubuntu, so that saves time after the install, but obviously you're going to spend time doing it, so continue. We could go through the process of installing third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and so on and so forth. I'm just not clicking that for the time being. Maybe I should have clicked the first one. This will save some time. Obviously the pause button will also save some time. So what we've got here, erase disk and install Ubuntu. Don't get too excited, that's obviously just going to be our disk, so the virtual disk. So it's a very frightening experience when you come across that first word. Oh, hang on a minute, no, don't do that. It's not funny. The first, second or millionth time when somebody does that. So just wait for that. Okay, so let's go with the show. So time zone, London, that's good enough for me. Time for some language settings. English UK, that's fine. Nearly time for some very secure security. Right, so I was going to put my name as array, as in an array of the castle. I'm not array of the ray. And array. Pop, 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 pop. This is when you get into the realms of this is not very secure, and somebody goes, I don't like that, and they're quite correct. We shouldn't like that, but it is something that we can get away with whilst we're just doing the temporary stuff. And of course, you can go in and change these things later with passwd password. To get things a rocking and a rolling. We can just do this for the time being. Right, so we're nearly there, judging by the little buttons at the bottom. And here we go, just going to do some sorting around now. Right, it's just a couple more bits and pieces to go. We'll soon be there with an up and running happy Linux machine. So because it was worth going back and do some housekeeping, get rid of those ISO files that are no longer required. Not just yet, just let things build first. And then if you want to run out a number of Ubuntu machines of the same ilk, then we can actually dolly the sheep those and clone those, as we'll see a little bit later. Just progressing through the files as we get to the help and support window at the end of the little info panels. So we're nearly there. It's just finishing off copying those files across. Just installing the system now. Just doing a little bit more. We'll leave this to finish to the end and we'll resume then. Right, well, just need to restart as it says for the installation to be complete. And that will be an up and running Ubuntu box, a virtual box variety. One of those, of course, it will become a VM. Here it goes. Just checking the session information up there. 5.1.6 is the variety of guest additions that it had as part of its original image. So that will have to change to match the fact that I'm actually running 5.1.22. But we'll do that in another video. So there we go, it's just firing away. So I just need to go, and if we look on the manager here and we look down onto the storage side of this, what it's saying is that it wants to see that as empty, right, which it has done. Right, it's taken that away. That's fine. So all we need to do now is just press enter, and that should continue. And a few whizzes and bangs as it makes its way. It's just booting up now. And there we are, with our super secret password. We should be able to log ourselves in.